Hello, 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 everyone. Good evening. Hi. Hello, dear people. It's Rail Natter. It's that time again. We're going to try to have a fun one this evening. Let's see how we go. As ever, drop in the chat. Shout at me. Tell me when you've thoughts, questions, queries. It's Rail Natter, which means it's the only podcast, asterisk, that is recorded live with you lot, being able to interact with it. And it happens almost every week and has done for years and years now. It's lovely to have you along. We're here to be talking about buses. It's bus natter tonight. We're talking about buses, all things that the buses have been had inflicted on them since the mid 80s. We're going to be touching on this, why buses have had a hard time outside of London, who did it, and most importantly, we're going to be doing a bit of a page turn through a report that is very funny. And hopefully it will be funny. We're going to have a laugh, I hope, rather than misery. We're going to laugh at libertarians, and what better way to spend our time? Anyway, people are booing already. Yeah, we'll get there. As ever, thank you very much to the Patreon supporters who allow this to happen. Without you, there'd be none of this. So thank you. And if you subscribe to the £5 above tiers, you get bonuses like the bonus tonight, which I'll talk more about later. Before we talk about anything else, I've got to start the show. Everyone, welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. And as the Intercity 225 fades away, I'm absolutely out showing support to the striking bus drivers in Swansea and West Wales. Shout out to you good folks. Best of luck. I hope you get exactly what you're asking for. Without you, there is nothing, because, goddamn, they aren't going to be successfully rolling out driverless buses ever. So forget that. Hello, look, it's me. We're going to be talking about this thing, written by Professor John Hibbs, The Dangers of Bus Re-Regulation. Look at the kerning on that thing. There's some pixels on display right there. This is interesting. A various thing and other perspectives on markets in transport. There's some other authors who get involved in this, but we're going to kind of gloss over their papers. But basically, there's it's kind of a compendium book thing brought out about 20 years after bus deregulation and about 20 years ago ish. So it neatly sits halfway between us and bus deregulation, which happened in 1986-87. So an interesting perspective to look on, because it has the benefit of hindsight, and then we have the benefit of double hindsight. So it should be, and the most important thing we must remember is we're going to be laughing at this thing because it's written by an idiot who is now dead, and you can't libel the dead. So we're going to be really laying thick into him. And for those of you who think it's unpleasant to mock a dead man, bad people who do bad things that have severe consequences for millions across the country deserve mockery. They deserve to have none of their legacy left intact. Bad people shouldn't be celebrated. Yes. Another. Yeah. What is this? Well, anyway, right. So, rail natter replacement bus natter episode. Rail replacement natter. Things of this nature. Buses are marvellous. I love buses. They're brilliant. I take buses regularly, and they are the fact that they are seen as separate rather than utterly conjoined to railways is part of the problem we have in Britain. We'll get to it. The IEA. What is the IEA? The IEA are the ones who nominally sponsored this document and put their name against it. Not them. No, that's the International Energy Agency. It's this lot, the psychopaths, the IEA, the libertarian ones, the ones who are extremely opaquely funded. That's them. There. Who they? Well, they are. It's an organisation that's been around since like 1955, founded by some nut job libertarian weirdo. It's an economics think tank, right-wing economics think tank. One of the first modern think tanks, ostensibly, very much like found a point of promoting kind of Thatcherite ideology, Truss ideology. Truss kind of was at the kind of the pinnacle of their influence, as it were. That went well for them. Unfortunately, this Labour government also loved them. But anyway, it's like a massive. It's funded to deny climate change. It's funded critically to attack anything like public transport. It's extremely pro privatisation. It's tied to all the Tufton Street nasties like the Adam Smith Institute. They're all part of the same So yeah, there's kind of just a bunch of them who all get funded by the tobacco, aviation, fossil fuel industries, among others. It's extreme. Yeah, it claims all sorts of charitable benefits, but the Charity Commission has finally opened a compliance case this year, May 2025. So is it going to change anything for them? No, of course not. They're part of the establishment, so they'll always be protected. But yeah, nutters and psychopaths. So within their ranks for a fair while, and associated heavily with them, was a chap called Professor John Hibbs. Here he is. Now, Professor John Hibbs. You might be thinking, who is this guy? Who's Professor John Hibbs? Well, Professor John Hibbs. Well, in the report that we're about to let's have a little look. What does the report say about Professor John Hibbs? It says John Hibbs started work in the bus industry when he went to the LSE in 1952 as a research student. He was asked to examine the economic consequences of the Road Traffic Act in 1930. He then wrote a thesis recommending deregulation. He worked at British Rail for a while, market research officer for the Eastern region, and then escaped that in 1969. So we didn't have to deal with him for very long. Was awarded a doctorate in 1983, and then that's the end of his little biography. One of the key things that is not mentioned here, which is really quite critical in that whole story, is what he did just after becoming just after being awarded his doctorate from Birmingham. And what he did was something along the lines of this. Yes, this. Because what he did was writing incessant papers for the benefit of ministers and Treasury and others, he wrote a sequence of papers that essentially became the 1986 deregulation legislation that led to the demolition of Britain's bus services across the country, and led to scenes like this on main roads in cities across the country and utter abandonment absolutely everywhere else. The chaos that he caused by deregulating buses, by the way, bus deregulation was where, prior to bus deregulation in the UK, we'd had a single kind of coordinating bus company, the National Bus Company, that was split up regionally and within various city centres, and an imperfect organisation, but it coordinated buses, and crucially, in relationship with the passenger transport executives, allowed for integrated transport, also allowed for cross-subsidy of kind of suffering services with extremely well patronaged services, and crucially also managed pointless waste on routes that were busy. So you didn't have multiple companies all competing along the on the profitable, dense urban core routes. And it also allowed passenger transport executives to consider, we have a bus bus corridor that's extremely congested. Perhaps something else ought to happen on there, like a tram or an underground. This is from a computer game. Don't get too excited. It just represents exactly what was happening on like Ancoats Road or like Ancoats Street or like Wilmslow Road or whatever. It's a Manchester or Nottingham or insert city here. This sort of thing continuing constantly. I'll escape you the chaos. Yes, there were lots of municipal bus operators as well. Quite a few were obliterated, but some thankfully survived. Reading is a good example. Nottingham has its municipal bus companies as well. We can go back. There are a couple of episodes to go back to if you want to reference this. We did Bus Back Better and talked about buses a long while back, which was well worthwhile. But we'll also talk about our integrated transport episode with Martha, which was fab. Hope Martha's out there and doing well, by the way. Smithdown Road in Liverpool, says Gareth. Yeah, absolutely. So what are some of the things we can look at that allow us to learn about how successful this deregulation process was, where the National Bus Company was split into infinity bus companies that were instantly then gobbled into enormous blobs like National Express, Stagecoach and First Group? Well, first of all, let's have a look at fares since deregulation. So fares in 1987 compared to the equivalent costs for motoring. Well, so deregulation, motoring expenditure continues there, and so the cumulative increase in costs since January 1987, when the Transport Act came into being and bus deregulation happened, rail fares have climbed substantially higher, over twice as high as motoring expenditure, and bus and coach fares higher again. So that's not great. So fares have risen far higher than the cost of motoring along the same time. That's not entirely bus deregulation. It's a policy, kind of a matrix of policies, all of which have been hostile to public transport. But it's a key factor. Meanwhile, even just looking at the period 2016-17 to 2021-22, we can see what the effect has been of a failing deregulated system on service numbers. And, well, in some cases, more than half of services have been cut in a very short space of time. But even, I would love to get this graph running from 1987 to now, where London, which was not deregulated, by the way, London remained regulated. Everywhere else in England, Wales and Scotland was deregulated. Northern Ireland was left to its own devices. You can see enormous cuts, 40% drop in Blackburn, 56.5% drop in Hertfordshire. Huge reductions, Somerset there having an enormous reduction, just massive reductions in bus, in service numbers. Spectacular. A couple of places where it's improved, over this period specifically, though, not since deregulation, crucially. I'm just going to emphasise that again. Certainly in the case of Cornwall, it's because there's been major interventions into buses in Cornwall, likewise interventions in Exeter, Plymouth, interventions in, Medway. Someone's shouting me if I'm incorrect. That is Medway, I believe. Interventions in certain parts of the country. Interventions in what have we got here? The northeast in Newcastle, Tyne and Weir. Yeah, Transport for Cornwall. Yeah, quite. Seprosphere is saying, why do the press constantly moan about the war on the motorist when the motorist gets coddled? Quite. Networker fan saying, as a Hertfordshire local, I can confirm buses there are terrible. They've been obliterated, Networker fan. Yeah, what do you think? Tell me about how your bus services are doing in your area. I suspect negrate. And of course, the crucial measure is how many people are actually using buses. Well, let's split bus ridership as in London and outside of London within the deregulated area. So England and Wales and Scotland outside of London, and then just bus journeys in London. So ridership since 1982, so that's pre-deregulation. You'll notice, by the way, the climb that had started happening from 1982, tying into increased involvements of PTEs, etc. You'll see the fact that it hits the deregulation line, and bus journeys in cities outside of London straight to the floor. Just a 50% drop. Don't be misled too much by this y-axis. John Byrne Murdoch committing crimes here. So drop of, an enormous drop of in ridership. Meanwhile, bus ridership in London has climbed. There have been some issues since the financial crisis. There have been some changes in bus journeys, but generally, ridership has increased in London. Nominally in line with private car ownership, some above, some below, but nominally with private car ownership, bus journeys have increased in London and have dropped horrendously elsewhere. Not great record for the success of bus deregulation, I would say, at this point. In fact, I would go as far as to say it was a shambles. And of course, it's not just about these metrics. Bus deregulation also obliterated, I was referring to Martha's episode 157, A Real Natter. Bus deregulation absolutely obliterated what we were trying to do to integrate different transport modes. This was absolutely key. And yeah, and a good example of this now is, as Ryan Hawke has just pointed out, buses won't serve the new bus stop at Newsham on the Northumberland line, as it adds time to the journey of about 2 minutes. What to do is to instantly take the bus service off the company that's running it now without any compensation and run it, and get the Tyne Metro to run it, or get it to be run by Nexus. Certainly get it to be run by a kind of a local combined local transport authority. Dismal, absolutely dismal. And so we turn to this report. With all of that in place, John Hibbs, all of that was very clear, by the way, 10, 20 years after, let alone 40 years after deregulation. We can see that for ourselves. We was back to the ridership numbers. So when this report was being written in the middle of 2000, where are we at? Oh yeah, at that point, okay, my line's a bit skew but at that point, bus journeys in London had very obviously been climbing extremely quickly. Meanwhile, we'd just seen a floor drop of ridership. Interestingly, the policy that the report that we're about to look at was written to address was the 2000 Transport Act, which was desperately trying to arrest the fall in bus, among many other things, arrest the drop in bus ridership, and it increased the amount of regulation over bus services, quality measures over bus services. Didn't do anything to arrest the fall. In fact, accelerated it briefly. So you can see that the state, everything's a mess at this point. Everything's an absolute mess. And meanwhile, this report gets written. So we're going to have a look, shall we? Let's have a look at this thing. Let me briefly enlarge my face. So yeah, bring up any questions you've got. Let's have a look. Katie Fenn saying, true story, I bumped into JBM on the night of the general election. I'll leave you to speculate who it is I work for. I was wearing my Greens for HS2 pro-trans, pro-trains t-shirt. Marvellous. JBM. Yeah. Crikey. Yes, anyway, right. John Burns Morgan. Is that who we're referring to? JBM. Anyway. Seprosphere is saying... Seprosphere. Sorry if I'm I miss when people's names rather than their tags are appearing. I noticed that in Newport, the main private operator Stagecoach doesn't use double-decker buses except on their YouTube adverts, but Newport Bus and Cardiff Bus do, even on relatively quiet services. Yeah. Did deregulation affect companies that existed outside the National Bus Company like Delane? Yeah. Sep R is here. Yeah, John Byrne Murdoch. Yeah, that's it. Katie Fenn. Yeah, adamant anti-HS2 person in the favour of like ? Chaos tech. Phil Woodward saying, when I first moved into my current home in southeast London in 2011, we had 3 or 4 buses an hour on the route going past my house. Only thing that's changed is they went from single to double deckers in 2016. Yeah. Downfall of councils removing bus lanes too. I mean, yeah, the rot is. Oh, it's Simon Rose. Oh, okay. Hello. The rot runs deep. Let's have a look at this report then. So it's a bit of a weird one because this report is not a nice readable PDF. It's an InDesign print. It's very odd. So it means I don't have individual pages. It's all spread about. So it's going to be a bit weird to read through it. But you can see my mouse. I'm up in the top corner. Hopefully this works nicely. We'll get there. Also, if we need to cheer ourselves up, I have a few things here. This, for example, might be useful.
Pennsylvania dominance.
And maybe a couple other things like, we might end up needing something like this. Okay, so fine. Right, so let's get. And also, we have what else do we have here? We've got. Yeah, that could also be quite useful. So we'll get there. So, that's a extremely long flashing top. Oh, and the cistern's filling up. Okay, fine. Right, let's get on with this. So we've got the bit about the author. There's all these sections. We're going to ignore the non-John Hibbs bits because who cares? We're going to just read the John Hibbs bits because that's funny. So yeah, there's one, two, there's the papers, the State Control Mess by Eamon Butler. I don't know who these people are, and so I'm not interested in reading their propaganda guff. So we're gonna ignore the Eamon Butler, Graham Parkhurst, Oliver Nipping, Paul Kevill. Those who know about them in the chat, remember to @me in the chat, by the way, so I can see that you've tagged me. We can. If you know anything about these people, then chip in. But we're going to ignore those people, and we're just going to concentrate on what our man Professor Hibbs has got to say for himself. So yeah, there's the author, and there's a foreword here pointing out, admittedly, that radical reform took place. Hibbs' analysis and history detail in the first part of this monograph should be of great interest to anybody in policymaking, as a student or blah, blah, blah. His policy prescription is very short. The 1985 Act was well conceived. Nothing is... Oh, good grief. Anyway, basically it says, John Hibbs played a leading role in the academic analysis that was a necessary antecedent of the 1985 Transport Act. This monograph is partly a celebration of John Hibbs' career. Ooh, okay. What's this? This drop here is rubber chicken. These are the things that are going to cheer us up if we get too depressed, to make sure we keep this one light. Yeah, there we go. That's nice. So, yeah, there we go. So fine. And there's some stuff by some other vampiric maniacs that we'll ignore. Okay, so summary. This is a fun thing for us to go through, actually, is the summary of these points, because we can go through these key points that can make us kind of laugh. So let's see if we can... let's see how this works, shall we? Let's just... summary. The philosophy that underpinned government intervention in the bus industry was first formally outlined in 1919 by Sir Eric Geddes. This philosophy was progressively implemented during the 1920s and 30s. It was part of... Geddes was also an architect of grouping and saw the idea of transport being integrated as a way to tackle private vehicle ownership. Good guy, hence why he's immediately hated on in this thing. Imperfect solutions, but he understood that things needed to be resolved. I enjoyed that. There we go. Let's pop that on loop. From 1930, bus operators required a service license. This remained in place for 55 years, and the adverse consequences of this constraint on market entry and competition are still with us. Oh, that's very easy. So all the problems that we have now with buses are, of course, because of that requirement for service licenses from 1930. Yeah, sure. As the government intervened more, cartels were reinforced and economic rationality in pricing and management was jettisoned. Oh, okay, cartels reinforced. It's interesting to write that when in the aftermath of deregulation you have the cartels of Stagecoach, First Group and National Express. Enormous owning groups that just own everything and had the resources to just blast a load of buses along a route to push out any small operators. Yeah, that's not cartel behaviour though. No. The railways were favoured by policymakers. When was that? Okay. And the growing potential for transport by road was not properly understood. What? Marples? Marples. Okay, fascinating. Coordination of services by central direction replaced coordination using the price mechanism. Multiple factors here. Firstly, coordination of services across modes. You can't do that without central direction. Yeah. Also, using the price mechanism means that you destroy bus services where you have rural areas where they are a lifeline, and you end up swamping corridors that don't have the infrastructure to cope and frankly are not suited to buses. If you rely on the perfect... This is going to be a theme throughout, but I'm just going to outright say it now. If you rely on... You know what, let's go big face for this. And we've got the Muzak to entertain. If you rely on the wonderful private market, the end state of buses is this. Here's your little snapshot. The end state of buses is this. You'll have infinity buses running on corridors that are not well suited to buses at all because they are swamped by buses and should be using, things like undergrounds, trams at minimum, but probably, actual metro systems. And areas that rely on buses that are ideally suited for buses, i.e. those areas that can't be served well by fixed infrastructure, so you need to braid the route, or it's very rural, the numbers are low, lose their bus service entirely. That's the end state that is basically advocated for by this bonkers idea of a perfect free market for bus operation. It's so obvious that is the end state. It doesn't require a rocket scientist or an economist. In fact, ideally don't have an economist to work that out. It is so patently obvious that is the result, that it's baffling that we got bus deregulation to start with, let alone this vampiric chaos continue to be pushed by the IEA to the present day. Baffling. Anyway, from 1947 to the late 1960s, the bus industry was gradually taken into state ownership. Hooray! If you want to see how that played out, you can have a look at pay close attention to the Amphitrite series, the Archipelago series, to see how that looks. Soon, in fact. A steep decline ensued, encouraged by the use of average cost pricing. Routes that did not cover average costs, but which nevertheless covered marginal costs and made a contribution to overheads, tended to be overpriced and would often be shut down. Yeah, that's an oversimplification. And of course, nothing's been shut down since then. I would love to have the data to show shutdowns before and after. From the late 1960s onwards, local authorities used their powers to subsidise the bus industry. Yes, having lost the principle of marginal cost pricing, the bus industry then lost any incentive to control costs at all. Yeah, that would be sensible if you were thinking of buses as some key private enterprise rather than enabler of mobility. The 1979 Conservative government this is where the point at which, like, in his mind, you're just hearing, because he's talking about Thatcher, you know. So yeah, the 1979 Conservative government liberalised some aspects of long-distance coach travel and freight haulage. Yes, they did, because they got rid of our wonderful. I've got to remember that I'm getting confused between the Amphitrust version and the UK version. If you have no idea what I'm talking about when I say Amphitrust, there's an entire YouTube series out there for you to watch and enjoy. Anyway, this was accompanied by limited privatisation. The 1985 Transport Act led to the privatisation of the National Bus Company, the gradual privatisation of municipal bus operations, and the replacement of licensing with the registration of bus services. This was bad, folks. This was extremely bad. Theoretically, the replacement of licensing with registration removed the impediments to competition and innovation. Two words being heavily misused here. Second thing, why do you need to have innovation on a bus service? You just need to run a good bus service. We know what a good bus service looks like. You don't need innovation on that at all. You just need to have a good bus that you reduce the emissions from as technologies improve. That's not innovation. That's just how stuff works. You just need to run a good service. You have a driver at the front who has good conditions, a good life, and feels safe and comfortable and happy because he's got a bus with 100 people in it. You know, things of this nature. You don't need innovation. And competition, again, if you have competition, what that does is kill routes that are not profitable and swamp routes that are. None of those are good for passengers and people who want to travel. Many benefits flowed from this, but the market was slow to react. Oh no, the market was slow to react. Because the market was being too influenced by the state. Oh, golly. Over time, the bus industry responded to the new environment in many places, showing considerable growth. Considerable growth? Where was that now? Where was the considerable growth? Anyway. So, yeah, the latest government intervention, the Transport Act 2000, latest 20 years ago, is a monumental intrusion into the freedom of transport management in Britain. Quality contracts reopen the possibilities for substantial regulation and control by local authorities. Franchise, or competition for a monopoly, is a likely outcome. Correct, franchising is what ended up happening. The new situation makes it likely that many local authorities will put the needs of buses second to the needs of grandiose, expensive, and impractical tramway schemes. And there's when we get to the nub. Because you have to remember the IEA hate fixed public transport, because as soon as you have a fixed public transport asset, you have to run a service on it, and it's effective. They hate that. They hate it. They want buses that run on heavily subsidized road infrastructure. They do not want fixed transport infrastructure that is usable, that is viable, where it's extremely obvious that competition doesn't apply, because they lose their grip on the process at that point. They hate fixed infrastructure. So that's a really key theme, is that the reason they're unhappy about this is because if you franchise buses or integrate buses into the overall transport system, there might be a realization that the bus isn't the right solution. Let's see. We have animal sound effects here. Let's go for what's goose? Let's see what goose is. There we go. Very nice. Anyway, so the UK government regulations reinforced by regulation from the European Union. Scary piano. The European Union obviously hates the European Union. The clock has been turned back, and we need to return to the principles of the 1985 Transport Act. There's a certain irony to this, because of course the EU is mostly staffed by psychopaths like Hibbs. They absolutely love the privatization and deregulation, and they love it. They love that shit. They want liberalized markets left, right, and center. They want as many operators competing with each other. So the idea that the EU is in any way turning back the clock on this stuff is baffling. Is just absolutely baffling. I've been asked if there are any seagull sound effects. I don't know about that. So the clock has been turned back. Yeah. A welcome development, though, is the fact that road pricing is firmly on the political agenda. So this is a funny one. Road pricing back on the political agenda amuses me, because road pricing is good, but the way that Hibbs here sees it is that if road space is not properly priced, buses face a competitive disadvantage against private car. Wait a minute. So you're saying that Hibbs, my man. Let's just hear this right. You want a free market, but not that kind of free market. You want the private bus operators to be given priority on roads that are a state asset. Otherwise, they face a competitive disadvantage against not said. And furthermore, local politicians feel they need to intervene in the allocation of scarce road space. Yeah, which they would if they're prioritising buses, which you've just said. What? I don't understand. Am I going to be throwing in constant sound effects through this episode? Possibly. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Baffling. Absolutely baffling sentence there. Yeah. Anyway, so that's Hibbs. That's Hibbs' summary of what's going on. And baffling. So, part 1, the dangers of bus re-regulation. So, we're still with Hibbs at this point. The story of government meddling, part 1. I love the fact that the railway age is in inverted commas here, but okay. So, transport is an activity of such central importance for the needs of people in society and for the health of the economy that it is surprising to see how weak is its status and how little it is understood. Completely agree. Absolutely agree with that. Completely agree. Yeah, marvelous. Anyway, so the extent to which it is by nature fail dangerous has invited state interference ever since the mechanization of the railways. Okay. This means that any discussion of the function and ownership of the bus industry must respect the differences between safety regulation, so-called quality control, and direct or indirect interference with the freedom of managers to succeed in running the business. Again, just remind you, just the way that we can predict the outcome of capitalism to a note, you can predict the outcome of this being, if the market is left to its own devices, the ill-performing areas where the buses are reduced or stripped away will perform worse and worse and worse as a vicious doom loop. Buses will be prioritised on routes that are seen as profitable to the expense of those as well, which means that would eventually collapse in on itself from the fact that you've just got a queue of buses moving at a slow pace and the whole system collapses. That's the very straightforward end state from doing this with buses. So it's and anything that would any involvement of a state authority at regional, local, city, or national level to stop and interfere with that would be perceived here by Hibbs as quantity control, which limits freedom of entry and exit, confers an element of monopoly upon the firms within its limits, while price control removes the firm from the benefits of the market with serious consequences for the economy. This is drivel. This is just top to bottom drivel. The way you keep saying interference, says Adam, makes me think he's the sort that doesn't like seatbelts. Yeah, it's the free market as you pass through the windscreen onto into a crumpled glass impaled heap on the floor. That's right. So, throughout the railway age, there was concern lest the company should exploit their supposed monopoly power, which led in 1921 to the close regulation of rates and fares. And here, in brackets, is just a statement of, inverted commas, fact. The concern has been shown to have been largely misplaced in view of the growing volume of freight moved by road throughout the period. That's, I would describe, a misinterpretation of the data. Between 1919 and 1939, road motor transport subjected the railway companies to increasing competition, and the solution of total state ownership of the railways attempted in 1947 was quickly found to be mistaken. Was it? What was it? We've never had a more successful railway operation than in the 80s under British Rail. It's climbed to success. Well, the railway we have now was developed by British Rail in the 1980s. That's the way it works. Is that development? Anyway, there's a load of dross of history and so on. The state moves in. Here we go. State. Blah 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 blah. We're not going. This is shit history. We're just not going to read and go through. So there we go. So. Let's see. Commission, state. So, the consequences of regulation. The immediate. This is just his thesis. So, summary: freedom or franchise. The industry was now sheltered from internal competition, and while the quality. Whatever. I don't care. The story of government meddling, part 2. The state takes over. So this is just talking about the fact that we end up with the National Bus Company and others, and it's marvelous. There's a load of shite history that we're just not going to read because it's daft. What we want to read is okay, the summaries are fun. The general sub-Keynesian thinking of the post-war years took little interest in transport, assuming that the industry was a utility suited for top-down management and control. The Geddes philosophy that had been enshrined in the nationalisation of 47 was expected to produce the coordination that remained the buzzword of the day. By 62, the failure of such a policy had been demonstrated. Now, I don't disagree with this, but for different reasons. The government hadn't done enough. Churchill had slowed them down substantially through the Conservative governments that he and then others followed with, that reversed some of the coordination. Attlee's government was imperfect and also got distracted. But the focus of having nationalised, particularly in terms of logistics, the opportunity to really optimise logistics was not taken, and the coordination between road and rail logistics was not taken. The coordination with a massive declining use of canals that happened in the post-war years also was not managed well, and resulted in basically what you could, we wouldn't call it a genocide, but a cultural obliteration of an entire people living in the country basically occurred when as the canal people who worked on canals were basically eradicated from public life. That's a whole other story, really. But so let's see. So 62 failure had been there, but the potential of leaving market demand with commercial management and pricing to provide a solution was still unthinkable. Alongside the objective of a planned economy, the importance of land use planning was to grow, though with little thought for the implications of public transport, let alone the growth of car ownership and use. Again, sort of correct, yeah, I'd agree with that. But the massive intervention of government in the business of running trains and buses was to be the characteristic of policy for 40 years after the end of the war, little challenged other than by a notable Hobart paper published by the IEA. Yes, that's right, the lovely IEA. So, by the end of the 1970s, there was a growing desire for more freedom among the younger managers in the National Bus Company, many of whom went on to make a success of privatisation. Again, by success, do they mean made tremendous personal profits in buyouts? I wonder who's one of those guys who made tremendous profits, 50 million quid of profit, in fact, from management buyout then being sold to a monopolistic large bus organisation. I don't know. Arguments for franchise were left often to be heard, although such a policy could be recognised in many other countries. So, bus franchising is more like what we describe as a concession model on the railways in the UK. No mention of Metro in Newcastle. Not a single mention of actual integration of transport, you'd notice. None at all. Only the small businesses in the coaching trade continued with no more than safety regulation. In general, it was government knows best. Okay. So, deregulation and privatisation up to a point. We didn't go far and deep enough, that's right. So let's jump to the summary, shall we? It took a long time for the bus and coach industry to adjust to the... Wait, you know what? Let's not jump forwards, because, let's see. So there's a little drivel here, but let's just... Where are we now? Throughout its history, the bus industry has been marked by a tendency towards concentration of ownership. Now, I wonder how you address that. Right. Economies of scale, which should have encouraged businessmen to expand the territory of their operations, were limited by the existence of municipal tramway departments, which started to run buses themselves at an early date. Each territory seems to have been limited by diseconomies arising from distance, so that as ownership groups appeared, their operating units remained discrete, with trading names directed at customer loyalty. Definitions of territorial boundaries led to the emergence of the cartel in 1916 and thereafter. It's weird, it sounds like he's describing post-deregulation arrangement. The larger municipalities benefited also from economies of scale, disposing of surpluses either by way of subsidy or by reducing their citizens' rates. At least two had area agreements with their neighbouring companies. So that... Many of the former NBC and Scottish Bus Group companies were disposed of through management or management staff buyouts. The industry was no longer exempt from competition law, so the territorial area agreements were now illegal, but they continue to exist by default under state ownership. Okay, yada, yada, yada. It's interesting that he's not picking up the fact that, standards of service have varied over the past 20 years, and the more successful groups have delegated management to their subsidiaries. Okay, so he's saying, there might be monopoly, but there are subsidiaries, and that's great. While others have been faced with serious problems due perhaps to too much top-down control. Interesting. Okay, yeah. Right. More recently, the larger companies have invested large sums in greatly improved vehicles, encouraged by new statutory requirements for disabled access. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. So why have they bought new vehicles there, sorry? Encouraged by new statutory requirements for disabled access. So a state intervention, you're suggesting, is why they've... Interesting. Okay, right. I'm sure there's no confusing conflict there in what he's saying. Just gloss over that. That's fine. But in some areas, the smaller firms have been able to operate at competitive fares by using elderly and more basic buses, something that has tended to bring the industry into disrepute. Wait a minute. So you're saying that the competitive fares are as a result of a shit quality product? How could we have predicted this? On the other hand, the smaller groups and many of the independents have made considerable advances in customer care with incentives for drivers to work as part of the team. Okay, with evidence list, but okay. The amount of on-street competition expected by some of those who advocated deregulation in the 1980s has been limited. It became plain that consolidation would be limited by the Office of Fair Trading, so that something like the pre-1947 territorial structures have remained in effect. I mean, okay, no, it's just that capital tends to monopoly the consolidation of that. That's just absolute sort of destination. So yeah, summary on this one: freedom or franchise. I don't know why I keep reading that, because that's what he said every time. It took a long time for the bus and coach industry to adjust to the extended commercial freedom provided by the Transport Acts. This may be accounted for by two factors. Oh, these would be good, right? Let's just we're getting right. So here we go. Let's get ourselves ready. What's he going to say? Oh, they're excited. Everyone's excited, right? Okay, so. The resettlement period as the ownership and management of the industry reacted to change, and the inherited reliance on average costing and pricing dating back to the intervention of the traffic commissioners in the early 1950s. Oh, okay, so it's the state's fault. Yeah. Okay, good. The concept of passenger transport as a utility suited for centralised public control goes back to the thoughts of men like Geddes and Ashfield a century ago. Attempts to apply this to the movement of freight were shown to fail. Were they? I'm inclined to say no, they don't. Then they were not, because I would not describe the current freight logistics sector as the road sector as a success, given that it has a chronic shortage of drivers, is extremely duplicated and wasteful, and there is no pathway to decarbonisation. But whereas the ownership pattern of that industry remains significantly small scale, there are still economies of scale in bus transport which account for the larger businesses that have always existed and have always sought to combine. Right. Ella, where's your favourite line? Go on, Ella, give me a hint. I don't want to miss it. Hello, Ella, by the way. Lovely to see you. What we've seen more recently has been the reappearance of the Geddes philosophy with a marked political stand. Oh, okay. Whereas it was once possible to argue that utilities were best held in public ownership, a line of reason that produced the London Passenger Transport Board in 1933 and the nationalisation in 1947, more recent history has shown that commercial management is less wasteful of resources. No, it's enough of that. Okay, right, yeah, no, that's obviously just what? Less wasteful. I just remind you that there were literal bus wars in the aftermath of deregulation, as buses competed desperately to work on the competitive, on the profitable routes where there were high densities of people that should not have been a bus, should have been a tram or a railway. So, okay, let's see. For reasons that public choice theory makes plain, just made up bullshit, whatever. As a compromise, we are now told that competition may not be a bad thing, but it must be competition for the market, not competition in the market. I would agree that that's bullshit, but not for the same reasons, I suspect, as Hibbs. This idea, commonly found in other parts of the world, is now put forward by the left-leaning passenger transport executives. Boo, the passenger transport executives. No, the passenger transport executives are extremely good and they need more power. I mean, they don't exist anymore, but what's taken over from the passenger transport bodies, as they've now formed into the combined authorities, is more power to them. It was supported by the Labour Party, the Liberal Democrats, and the Green Party in the recent general election. Yeah. It is easily refuted as false logic. So here we go. Competition is what goes on in a market. What the argument really proposes is competition for a monopoly. right? To prevent exploitation of such a monopoly, the franchise must be for a limited period of time, after which the auction will be held again. A consequence of this is the loss of investment suffered by a company that fails to renew its franchise, which was provided for in rail privatisation by the leasing of rolling stock. But in Britain today, the successful franchisee in the bus industry is not intended to be a fully commercial monopolist at all. What a bizarre series of... At no point in any of this, by the way, has there been any discussion of, like, it's all about the success of the bus company. At no point has there been an observation of service provision. There's no data. There's no curiosity about data of service provision, rural service provision, or urban quality. No data collection from, for example, at this point, Passenger Focus was doing the bus surveys. You had and Transport Focus was looking at bus surveys and understanding the quality of service provision from buses across the country. Yeah, just like absolutely no consideration of the experience. A little bit about we got new buses, but because the state forced us to. Yeah, fascinating. Who shall run the buses? Okay, right. So let's jump through this again. The politics of intervention again. So here we go. Let's look at this. The evil Passenger Transport Executives Group. No, they're not evil. This is just Hibbs who hates an organisation that might risk building a train or a tram, has from its formation pressed for the PTEG, which was like the combination of all the passenger transport executives, has from its formation pressed for the return of bus services to public control by franchise, which I don't like because I think it's a nasty, pointless compromise and you just got a layer of pointless admin, but it's better than the current condition, of course. It will be remembered that the passenger transport authorities after 1974 have been made up of councillors nominated by the Labour-controlled local authorities in their area. Boo! The quality contracts provided for in the Transport Act 2000 provide for their political intent, while the quality partnerships form a halfway house, in fact largely accepted by the industry, which has remained firmly opposed to the contracts. Yeah, okay, interesting. And here's where the Europeans get involved. Oh. Day tickets and return tickets inherently destroy competition as you're stuck with the same company for both legs. Absolutely. Yeah. When the Transport Act 2000 was being prepared, there appeared from the European Commission a draft regulation on action by member states concerning public service requirements and the award of public service contracts in passenger transport by railroad and inland waterway. Very close in design to the quality contracts, the regulation would require a competent authority to pursue legitimate public service objectives within a framework of regulated competition. Whoa. Stop it. Yeah, no. So, to pursue legitimate public... anyway, right, enough of that. While this may seem to some to be reasonable... Wait a minute. Let's just reread that again. A competent authority should pursue legitimate public service objectives within a framework of regulated competition. While this may seem to some to be reasonable, it looks very different when the required criteria are considered. So let's have a look at the required criteria to see how evil these are. Consumer protection factors including the accessibility of service in terms of their frequency, speed, punctuality, reliability, the extent of the network, and the service information that's provided. Dreadful, boo. The level of tariffs for different groups of users and the transparency of tariffs. Boo. Transparency of fare costs. Integration between different transport services. Boo. Rubbish. Accessibility for people with reduced mobility. Boo. Environmental factors, including local, national, and international standards for the emission of air pollutants, noise, and global warming gases. Boo. The balanced development of regions. Boo. Transport needs of people living in less densely populated areas. Boo. And by this point, where are we at? Passenger health and safety. Boo. The qualifications of staff. Boo. And how complaints are handled, disputes between passengers and operators are resolved, and redress is made for service shortfalls. All of those are dreadful, aren't they? Awful, awful things. Oh my goodness me. Just dismal. How dare all of those be things that passengers obviously want? just my goodness. So here we go. The pressure for quality contracts this is where it comes back to rail now, folks. The pressure for quality contracts comes largely from the PTEs, most of which have an interest in the provision of light rapid transit, LRT. Because trams are to be found in continental cities, it would seem that their absence in Britain shows us to be falling behind. Correct, that's an accurate statement, yes. You can end one of those classic and the sentence can end, the paragraph can end there type situations. Yet almost all the investment in LRT in this country has been loss-making. Yeah, because you're building infrastructure for public good. Imposing a greater burden on council tax. It is as if the tradition of municipal pride in the tramway back in the 20th century has resurfaced in the political fashion that has led to so much waste, with too many examples of poor forecasting and design. All of them are extremely well used. Yet it is the PTs themselves which have been responsible, and it is this that contributes a further strand to their pressure for franchise. Almost all of the existing LRT lines in this country use reserved track, often disused railway lines, but there are schemes afoot for on-street running which would bring the trams and buses into direct competition. In such cases, it's common on the continent for the bus service to be curtailed so as to direct demand to the trams. Correct, that's the right thing to do, because you have an integrated transport system where you don't compete them against each other, which costs so much more to provide. Buses are expected, trams which cost so much more to provide. That's not true. It is not true. Trams are cheaper to provide the buses on a corridor where they are being well used. Buses are expected to act as feeders to the trams, despite the disadvantage for the customer of having to change from one to the other. Oh, it's a dreadful disadvantage, except that anywhere where you have good trams and good buses, changes are made without hesitation. Just look to London. You don't have to go to the continent to see that. Just look to London. Changes are made without hesitation because the frequency means that you don't care. You just get off and then you change and it's fine. It is hard to avoid the conclusion then that quality contracts would be so devised as to do the same, sweeping both modes into one integrated system, whether the customers want it or not. Customers don't want integration. Oh no, they want something else. Perhaps this is what that overused word means. Oh, integration. In the 1930s, it was coordination, which would have meant much the same thing. Do you see why I say this man is a moron? This man is a moron. Right, how are we summarising this section? Yeah, okay, so... I just saw a sentence that's just off to corker. Okay, I'm going to get to it in a second. Let's just... Okay, I have to concentrate. It is hard to conceive a policy for public transport short of total public ownership that takes us farther from the benefits that follow from an open and contestable market. All of those benefits... We've seen so many of those benefits on that slide deck that I whizzed through before this, right? Right. After 20 years of comparative freedom, the bus industry today has become a commercial success. First group, Stagecoach, huge profits. Remind me how the service provision is looking. Remind me how fares are looking. Remind me how many, what the cost, and in fact, remind me what the ridership of buses is now compared to then. Interesting. What I'm going to read is a sentence which I love so much. What has been sadly lacking ever since 1985 has been a positive attitude on the part of highway authorities. A positive attitude on the part of highways authorities. Oh, right. Sorry, I'm having too much fun with this. That's glorious. To provide services, buses need their own track like trains. This has to be shared with cars and goods vehicles, but cars are singularly inefficient users of road space. In the absence of road pricing, it should be the responsibility of local government to deal with the problem. So state intervention only if it benefits the private bus companies. That seems the opposite of everything he's been saying. Interesting. Buses, however, do not rank high in public status, and motorists who are voters and ratepayers resent the introduction of bus lanes and other kinds of priority. Right. A professional gap seems to have grown between urban planners and bus operators, reflecting perhaps a distrust of commercial management. Or is it maybe that they're not in the same office? The real problem facing the passenger and freight transport industry, whether by bus, car or train, is the prospect of falling overall motoring costs and rising fuel prices forecast over the coming decade. Now, what might that look like? I wonder. Subsidy, which is an inevitable consequence of franchise, can be no answer to this. Oh, right, okay, cool. Right, what is the answer? Only an industry made up of professional, profit-seeking businesses can hope to meet the challenge. Supported and respected by local government planners. So, subsidised. You just said subsidy can be no answer to this, but you want a local government plan. Do you see what I mean? This guy is he's just a charlatan. He is just saying what he's been told to, saying what his paymasters have essentially told him to. He's a useful idiot, if nothing else. The idea that this man became a professor, I'm sorry, is a sorry indictment on the state of transport science, academic transport science in the UK, which is, for the most part, I'm sorry, a complete crock of shit. let the first move be the revision of the Transport Act 2000 and an end to quality contracts. Okay, right. So we've all had our fun. I enjoyed that very much. This is obviously complete horseshit. Let me go to half face. I forgot to do my big face there. Yeah, this is obvious nonsense. But I hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed going through that and seeing not just the inconsistencies, but just how much it's obvious rubbish. Like it's not that it's not some deep complex theory here. It's just piffle compiled and made to look sensible. It's just drivel. There is no analysis. There is no understanding of exploration of like you're going on about what about people who use it and the impact of those people moving around on how their communities look. This, unfortunately, this guy wrote the policy of deregulation and has caused incomprehensible harm, not only to Britain's economy, by the way, but also to destroying communities, wrecking the way that people are able to move around, pushing much greater car reliance as a result of the decimation of buses at a time when the opposite could have happened. It's staggering. It is absolutely staggering. Yeah, people are right in the chat. This is happening across Europe. This is not unique to the UK. We did bus deregulation and we did it hard, but the rest of Europe is continuing to do much of this rubbish. It's deeply frustrating, deeply frustrating, painful, and harmful. The rural Netherlands is dead because of this rubbish. Yeah, Nerdian, yeah, absolutely. Right. Bonuses. A brief interlude before we do some news. Bonus episode tonight will be at 9:30. It will be Katie Fenn's in the chat, by the way. Hello, Katie. Your question's getting picked up. How to fix St Pancras' domestic platforms. How to fix them. How to fix the service. How to do something about them. What that? Yeah, we're just going to be talking all things East Midlands Railway and what you do to fix it, and because it's not easy. But 3 little platforms at the bottom of a major north-south main line seems mental to me. And there are reasons for that, but yeah, we're going in. We're going to have a look at that. That was the question. So send more of your questions, and bonus people, the £5 and above tier, you will get to come in. You can chuck questions, and we just have a little dig around it. It's like an old form rail natter where I waffle around and we just have a general chat with some maps up on screen. It's beautiful stuff. Join that momentarily. So a bit of news. First thing I wanted to talk about. Indonesia's China-backed bullet train derailed by mounting debt, according to the FT. This is an interesting little story, well, big story, because Indonesia, lots of bits of transport success in Indonesia at the moment, but their high-speed line, well, let's put it this way, it's not doing great and it's threatening. This is a Belt and Road Initiative project from China, so major amounts of funding from Beijing. But it is struggling. It's racking up losses. It risks killing the rest of the project off. And creating an enormous sort of debt burden for Jakarta. Now, why might this be? Let's just dig into a key paragraph in this FT story. The rail link, which covers a distance of 145 kilometres in just 45 minutes, I mean, those dimensions sound familiar, has not proved popular. Stations are far from city centres, and tickets are pricey. The cheapest one-way fare of $15 is more than 5 times that of the slower train. Passenger traffic was about a third of forecasts, lawmaker Durianto has said in a parliamentary hearing in August. So wait a minute, that's expensive fares, stations miles from anywhere. That all sounds familiar. Oh, wait a minute. Right, okay. I'm sure we're not building a painful stub of a high-speed rail line that's going to be a tremendous flop because it lacks a connection into the city centre. Yeah, interesting. Okay, yeah. I wonder. Let's watch this space. But there are some maps pointing out how much of the network has been scaled back as a result of China getting cold feet and Jakarta, the Indonesian government, sort of mismanaging this project. It's an interesting one. That not good. Another thing that's very interesting. With the US government shutdown, which is just about wrapped itself up now because of cowardice from the Democratic Party. What's been very interesting to watch is the extent to which the US aviation industry has collapsed in on itself. Here's a fun post from the old Blue Sky. So it turns out the US air travel system was incredibly deeply dependent on federal funding to just run day to day all this time to the benefit of private airline shareholders when everyone thinks that state-run trains are leeching off the government. Wild. Oh no, weird, says woke mayor Brian Van.bluesky.social. Yeah, interesting that. And indeed, during the government shutdown, thousands of US flights have been cancelled or delayed. This is on top of the fact that since Trump arrived, it seems that he has a Midas touch of destroying airliners left, right, and centre. Yeah, US air industry, it's a free market success until the government steps away and this really important thing called an enormous and extremely complex state-run air traffic control system ceases to function and is run only by volunteer staff who are not getting paid. Interesting that. I wonder if that has anything to do with challenges with the way that the US whole transport system is operated, and the fact that they have just enormous numbers of utterly pointless flights. More episodes of those coming up soon, I'm sure. Yeah, why not? Interesting one, that. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so... No, that's green. We have some news. We have some fun news. Hope that was fun. We had a bit of an episode there. We had a bit of a rail natter. We did a few things. We talked about buses. We laughed at Professor Hibbs and his chaos. Next week, yeah, go. Any quick wee questions pertinent to the episode that we can chuck through? Yeah. So, yes, it's bonkers. It's fun. That was the goddamn news. Yeah, exactly. The Daniel Krause near the Flixbus boys are monopolists. Oh yeah, crikey. Right. Hello, Jack Elliott, and hello, Max Transit as well. Go Birds. Exactly. Go Birds. Next week is an episode explaining why the PWI needs to go. No, why we must rename the Permanent Way Institution. That's next week's episode. It'll be happening just at the point where there is a vote. So if you are a PWI member, you must go out and vote in favour of changing the name of the institution. It's going to be an episode that I need to put some serious care into because it's a really, really important episode. We will be talking about why the Permanent Way Institution needs to change its name to the Railway Engineering Institution, why that's an extremely positive move, and why it will be really calamitous for the railways, let alone for the institution, if that doesn't happen. And it's extremely important that we do that. That will be next week, a very important one to join. Everyone, thanks so much for joining. I had some fun there. For your questions, do drop it if you've got other questions, because also the bonus episodes, by the way, are not just a one trick pony. We take open questions from everyone. So more of the random, open, irrelevant questions that we used to do in Rail Natter and Distract Me, and I would love. Well, I still love doing those, but we're pulling them into the bonus episodes to keep these episodes a little more focused and on track, as it were. On which note, there are a few podcasts, by the way, that I'll be recording and popping up in soon. So keep your eyes on that. There's a Britanology coming out soon that should be a laugh that I had that I was on. Also, if you want to spot some fun that I was having with Roz from Well There's Your Problem, he and I were mucking around in York very recently. So yeah, you can go and see what we're up to there. It's incredible the extent of how far behind my preview is over here. Anyway, right, I've stopped waffling. Right, anyway, everyone, you take very good care of yourselves, and I will see you next week, if not on the bonus in a very short few minutes. Cheerio, everyone. Cheerio.